Hello again. Welcome to part 2 of creating Mr. Dinosaur series. We are going to start with his head. So this is the video on how to create his head, and I will stop and start this video so you can see progress as I go and you don't have to watch the whole time. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a slip knot. If you are not familiar with the slip knot or with the single crochet, which is our primary stitch for our dinosaur, you will definitely want to watch a video tutorial on how to do both of those things. Now, I have one on my channel, but there are a lot available on YouTube, so you don't necessarily have to watch mine. All right, so my first thing is I'm going to chain 2 stitches. Now I'm going to work the rest of my stitches for this into this hole. This first row is going to give me my circle, and then I'm going to build from that circle out as I go. I'm not going to turn the project at all. I'm just going to keep going in a spiral, more or less. We're going to work this dinosaur from his nose to the back of his head. So we are starting right here, and then we're going to increase as we go, and then at the very end we will decrease and really quickly so he gets kind of that flat back head there. All right, so I've done my chain 2. Now I'm going to work in the first chain I did, and I'm going to do 4 single crochets in this chain here. I'm just using it as my loop, basically, so that I have a place to put all these single crochets, and then I will build from that loop out. What happens to this tail is not really important because it's going to be on the inside of his nose, so I just move it out of the way. I am going to mark my last stitch. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to mark this last guy. So I'm going to go ahead and take my stitch marker and put it through there. Now every single crochet I'm going to do from now on, I'm going to do through both loops of the one before it. I mentioned before why I do that, but basically it removes that ridge that single crochet gives you, and I feel like it also makes it a little stronger, and the stitches don't seem to pull out of shape as well. For my second row, I'm going to work 2 single crochets in each of my stitches from the last row. So I ended my last row with 4 single crochets. This row I will end with 8. So I've got 1, 2, and I'm going to go into here. Now this first row is kind of hard to get your needle, or your hook, I should say, into these stitches because they're pulled around in such a tight circle, but after the second or third row, it gets a lot easier. So don't panic if this row seems really difficult. It doesn't stay that way. All right, so here is 3. And I'm just pulling that back with my thumb so it's easier to get in here. Depending on the yarn you choose for your project, sometimes it'll try and split when you put your hook through it, and that gets a little hard. So I always just make sure I'm going through the appropriate part of the yarn. Now this is my last stitch, so I'm going to pull this guy out. I'm going to do 2 in here, and then I will replace it because I do want to mark my rows to make sure that I know which row I'm on, and when I'm following my pattern, I can then not lose my place if I have to put my project down for any reason. Okay, so now I should have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. So I'm going to mark my last stitch here before I move on. Now my next row, I am going to work 2 single crochets in my first stitch, and then 1 in the next stitch. 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way around. So I am going to pause my video here really quick and do that. So I'm going to do 2 in this stitch here, and then 1, and then 2, then 1, all the way around. I don't want to have to, I don't want this video to end up being 45 minutes long. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, and then I will catch you on the next row. All right, everyone, I have now completed that row, and I have 12 stitches around. I've replaced my marker. So now I am going to go do 1 row where I'm just going around with 1 single crochet in each stitch. And that's just, I just kicked out my marker. That's just to build depth on the nose before we increase for the bridge of the forehead. So I'm just doing 1 stitch all the way around. Now my next row, we get to start counting, and this is going to be super fun. So we're going to do 1 single crochet in the first 6, and then 2 single crochets in each of the last 6 stitches. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of create a little bit of a fan, and you'll see how his forehead is shaped up where his eyes are. This is going to create the extra stitches there we need to get that shape. So here is my last stitch. All right, so like I mentioned, we are now going to do 6 that are just a single crochet. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in each of these last 6, I'm going to do 2 each. Now the rest of the pattern is worked in this same way for the head. You just follow along with the instructions and you will slowly build out the shape of the head. Now I am going to speed ahead and get to the point that I start my decreases. So I'm going to finish off this row and then pause the video and get to the decreases so you can watch how the head shaping happens and where you need to then put in your stuffing. All right, so I will catch you in just a minute. All right, I have just finished my 10th row and now I'm on my 11th row, which is where I'm going to decrease. Now, if you haven't done a decrease before, don't panic, it's not that hard. All we're going to do is we're going to stick our hook in the first single crochet here. We're going to pull up a loop. We're going to stick our hook in the next single crochet, pull up another loop. Then I'm going to wrap it and pull it through all 3. Now what I've done is I've created 1 stitch that spans 2 below it, so it's going to slowly pull in the project. It's going to make the hole smaller. So I'm going to do this all the way around. And you'll notice that the hole will start to close as we're doing this. After this row, we're going to stuff it, and then we're going to do another row of these decreases. Now the reason we're going to stuff it is our hole is going to get too small to get our fingers into. So we're going to have to stuff it before we can move on. So I'm going to go ahead and decrease all the way around. Now you'll notice I crochet pretty tight when I'm doing stuffed animals. If you find that your holes in this project are too big and you're going to be able to see through it, you crochet more loosely than I am. So what you might want to do is move down a hook so that your hook is a little bit smaller, then your holes will automatically be a little smaller. But that is completely up to you. And depending on what you stuff it with, it could kind of give it a cool effect if you can see a little bit of the stuffing through. So it is up to you. Like I said, your dinosaur will either be just slightly larger or slightly smaller than mine, depending on how your stitches are. It shouldn't hurt anything. All right, we are down to our last one. And you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and leave that marker there while I go through here. Okay, you'll notice, you see it's starting to give it kind of a crown here, and then it's going to come down and this hole is getting smaller. All right, so I am going to go ahead, move my marker, and add some stuffing. Now when I add some stuffing, it can pull your project out of shape, so you can end up with kind of a weird bump here and there. So kind of just pay attention when you're putting the stuffing in that you're putting it in and you like the head shape that's happening as you're doing that. And I've made sure that the tail that I started with is on the inside of the nose, so it's just buried in there. All right, now I'm going to cram as much stuffing as I can in here. I've found with stuffed animals that if you don't stuff them tightly, the stuffing itself kind of compresses over time a little bit, and they end up being floppy, and you don't certainly want a floppy dinosaur. So we want to make sure that we stuff it pretty tightly so that when our stuffing does seem to compress, it will still have a good shape to it. All right, and you see I've got a nice little bridge to my nose here, and the head has a great shape, so I'm pretty excited about that. So let me throw this guy in. And you'll be able to get a little bit of stuffing in once you finish the decrease. So if you find out your stuffing's like this and it's just going to be in your way, pull it out, and then you can always kind of shove it back in with one finger at a time as you go. Now my 12th row I'm going to go ahead and work this decrease again around. So I'm going to go ahead and work my decreases all the way around. And this will almost close up the hole all by itself. But we're going to do kind of a drawstring thing at the end here to help pull it in the rest of the way. And this is our last one. I'm going to go ahead and remove my marker because I don't need it anymore. All right, so you see how we have just this tiny hole left? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn, and I'm going to leave myself about a 12-inch tail. And I've just realized I don't have my scissors sitting right here. So let me go get them and I'll be right back. Okay, back with my scissors. All right, so I'm going to leave, like I said, about a 12-inch tail to... Part of the reason I'm leaving such a long tail is that I'm going to use this to sew his head to his body later on. So I'm going to make sure I have enough yarn to do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and just pull my hook out. And when I do that, I'm going to take all this yarn with me so that it automatically creates a keeper. Right? It's not a knot really, but it's not going to come out, right? This is not going anywhere. So I am going to now start to thread this around with my yarn needle. And then I will eventually tie a knot, but I want to get my threading started. So the way I'm doing this is I'm going to weave. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go over and under. Can you see where that is there? Here. And then I'm going to go over this one, under this one, all the way around. There, do you see how neatly that pulled that in? Now, if you find it like with these decreases, you kind of end up with a little more space here than I do with the rest of my head. I might go around again, just depends on what my tolerance level is for that hole, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and go over and under one more time and kind of fill in these spaces a little bit. Now we're also going to probably end up putting some spikes here, so we can hide a lot with our spikes. All right, so I've now made my way all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and just come through one of these stitches, give it a good once over, see what I think. Oh, he's cute. All right, now I'm going to tie a knot here, and then I'm going to pull this yarn all the way through the head and bury it. So I'm going to go ahead and go under this one, through this loop, and I want to make sure my knot is going to be tight here. So I'm going to pull it and hold that. All right, so there's my knot. So now I'm going to stab this. I'm going to look at the front here and find out where the bottom of the head is, and it's going to be like right about here. So I'm going to go ahead and stab my yarn needle through and pull that out the bottom. And now my head is ready for when I want to sew it to my body. I've already got an anchor here so I can sew it through. And by using the same yarn, you have fewer knots, right? So you're worried about it. You're not going to be worried about all your knots coming undone because you're going to have fewer, because you're going to use this to sew it to the neck. And then even potentially you could attach this to an arm or one of the spikes in the back and tie another knot and just keep it all together. All right, so there is our head. Yay! Now I don't want to put his eyes on yet. I want to wait until I get him on the body and then I'll put his eyes on. But if you are really excited and want to go ahead and stitch some eyes on, you can do that now. All right, I will see you over in our next video where we talk about creating the body. Bye, everyone.